Hello, BookTube. This is Weekly Reads. Earlier this week, I discussed the books I attempted to read this past weekend. For this part of Weekly Reads, I will be talking about the volumes of manga that I read over the course of the work week from Monday through Friday. My main goal for this week was to complete YuYu Hakusho by Yoshihiro Togashi. So I read volumes 13 through 19, the final volume in the series. And I will talk about Yu Yu Hakusho at the end. But first, I read a few other volumes of manga, starting in the order of how many volumes of each series I read, starting with Volume 6 of Delicious in Dungeon by Ryoko Kui. Delicious in Dungeon is a series inspired by role playing games and the sort of uh, concept of the game setting being a dungeon. In the setting, there is a vast underground dungeon on an island. And over the decades, adventurers have attempted to explore the depths of the dungeon. Amongst these adventurers are a group led by Leos and his sister Fallon. Leos is a warrior, Fallon is a mage. Joining them are Marcial, Fallon's uh, friend and fellow mage, and Cholchuk, a halfling who is the party's thief. There are two other companions, Ashuro, and who's a warrior like Laos, although from a country more inspired by Japan than Western Europe, as Laos is. And I always blank on the um, dwarf warrior who was with them. The party is attacked by a red dragon, and Fallon is eaten. When the party resurrects, Fallon is not amongst them. She's being digested. And once that happens, she will not be able to be resurrected. So Laos decides to immediately go back into the dungeon to try to rescue her without having any resources um, with them because their what treasure they had does not come back with them, so it's still in the dungeon. So Shuro and the dwarf warrior leave the party, and just Marcial and Cholchuk join Laos. Um, and that's where they meet Shinshi, a dwarf who lives off of the dungeon. He lives in and off of it. And this excites within Laos a desire to do something similar. Laos is deeply interested in monsters, including what they taste like. And so Shinshi joins the party and they go exploring the dungeon, living off of it. So they're eating various monsters like um, vegetables grown off of the backs of golems, um, eating mandrakes and dryads and harpy eggs and all sorts of edible monsters. Eventually, they find the red dragon and defeat it, um, and manage to resurrect Fallon. However, the magician who rules the dungeon appears and takes Fallon because the red dragon served the magician in some capacity, and Fallon is transformed into a chimera. It's at this point that Laos decides to return to the surface to try to um, gather more supplies. And they meet two other parties, one led by Shuro, who has returned to the dungeon and attempt to find Fallon himself, and a party led by Kabru, who is a young man who has had several run-ins with Leos's group, although Kabru has been and his party have been killed during those encounters, and I've often had their stuff taken, although it's mostly food. So in this volume, the groups sort of kind of congregate together. They're attacked by harpies and eat harpy egg omelets. And Shuro is told how Martial resurrected Fallon, which sets him off, and the party splits. However, one of Shuro's companions ends up joining Leos's group, and Leos and his companions continue down into the dungeon to try to confront the magician who rules it, because only they can free Fallon from his control, or their control. So other events in this arc, in this volume, include freeing Shuro's companion from one of her curses, in which they encounter a hag, and they also have to face some shapeshifters, which is really fun. And finally, Leos has to free Martial from a nightmare. And apparently, nightmares are muscles. So I really enjoyed it. This was a really interesting volume. Quite enjoyed it. I wish I had managed to read more of, like, one more volume, because I do have volume 7 as well, but things did not quite work out. So I will be reading volume 7, 8, and 9 once volume 7, 8 and 9 show up. So this is a chimera, which is cool looking artwork. I really love the artwork in this series. Also, there were harpies. And there are some shapeshifters locked up in the dungeon. And it's really funny how they eventually figure out who the like copies are. Leos, whose copies are all captured, basically decides to make the others cook something. And somehow he guesses right. But yeah, so fun volume. I also read 2 volumes of Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead by Haro Aso and Kotaro Takata. I read volumes 4 and 5. So Zom 100 is about a zombie apocalypse. Akira Tendo is a young man who works at a soul-destroying corporation. He is a wage slave, a wage zombie, if you will. Until the zombie apocalypse happens. Akira takes the opportunity to quit his job, as much of his job as it's still there, and decides to make a bucket list of the 100 things he wants to do before he becomes a zombie. Among these items in the early volumes are hang out with his best friend, play video games on a big screen TV, wine and dine a flight attendant. In these volumes, Akira and his friends, Kensho, who is a college friend of his, and it's not Shizuka. Oh yes, Shizuka. Are travel who's a very practical young woman who wants to survive as best she can, who's fallen in with Akira and Kensho in an RV. And so they're heading to Akira's hometown in Gunma. And in this volume, while they're traveling, they encounter a horde of zombies attacking a truck. Akira decides to put on his superhero outfit and fight off the zombies. However, he is preempted by a young woman who has a similar idea to him. She was the truck driver. And she is revealed to be Beatrix, a German tourist with a deep love of Japanese culture who has outfitted herself in a samurai outfit. So, on the cover, this is Akira, this is Kensho, this is Shizuka, and this is Beatrix. So Beatrix is trying to get a truck full of fish to the last sushi chef alive. And Akira, Kensho, and Shizuka help her achieve this, and they all enjoy perhaps the last meal of sushi that they ever will have. They also go to a hot springs to enjoy the waters, and while heading to Gunma, they find that the tunnel into the city or into the village is blocked off and populated by zombies on both sides. So they have to take a detour. And while they do that, they encounter a carpenter in the forest building a treehouse to live. And while Akira and Kensho and Shizuka help complete the treehouse, Beatrix holds off a horde of zombified boars. And then the quartet arrive in Gunma, Akira's hometown. And this is the beginning of a storyline that extends into volume 5. So Akira and company have returned to his hometown, and they've, like several other refugees from the zombie apocalypse, have settled down to make a life for themselves. However, not everybody in the village wants to do this. There are a quartet of misanthropes, neats, who aren't helping around. And they develop malicious intentions towards the village. They are led by a young man named Higarashi, who was a college classmate of Akira and Kensho's, who has become a misanthrope and rather self-destructive. And so he has himself created a bucket list of 100 things he wants to do before he becomes a zombie. Unfortunately, his desires are malicious. And so he and his friends release the zombies from the tunnel and lead them into an attack on the village. And Akira, Kensho, Shizuka, and Beatrix try to help protect the villagers and fight against the zombies and this evil quartet. Each member of the quartet is a foil for Akira in his group. Most obviously, Higurashi, who is the polar opposite of Akira in so many ways, even though they both have a bucket list of things to do before they become a zombie. And it seems like a lot of Higurashi's ire is directed towards Akira, up to and including a sadistic demand to in a sadistic hostage situation. In order to save his father, Higurashi demands that Akira do something horrible to himself. And Kincho faces off against one of the other members of this quartet who despises his wife. And this is contrasted with Kincho, who is incredibly respectful to all of the women he meets. And if he's with a woman, she is the most important person in his world for the time that they're together. Shizuka and Beatrix also have confrontations with their foils, although I'm not entirely sure how much Shizuka's foil is a foil for her. But those conflicts will be kind of concluded in Volume 6. But I really enjoyed these volumes. I had a blast. I really wish I had picked up more volumes than just 2 every time I ordered them. But let's look at some pictures from here. So there's that. No. And then and I really like the inclusion of Beatrix. She is a hoot. Just absolutely delightful. So it was really fun. And then there's Kincho doing what he is best at. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, this was a lot of fun. I also read today 3 volumes of Frieren Before Journey's End by Kanehito Yamada and Tsukasa Abe. So, volumes 4, 5, and 6. Which, again, I wish I had picked up more volumes when I ordered these, because this is a really good series. So, Frieren Beyond Journey's End is about an elf mage named Frieren, who 80 years before the series began was a member of a party of heroes who took down the Demon King, an evil force that plagued the world for millennia. Almost 30 years after the death of the leader of the party of heroes, Frieren takes on a young girl as her apprentice, as a last favor to another member of the party. And this young woman's name is Fern, who is an apprentice mage herself. And so they go on an adventure to learn more magic and to visit a certain place. They are joined by a young warrior named Stark, who was the foster son of another member of the party, the dwarf Ison. In this volume, they are also joined by a priest who is rather like the priest who was a part of Frieren's old party. Although this priest, Sane, is a bit more corrupt than Hyder was. Hyder was the old priest, who was Fern's foster father. And so the early chapters of this volume see Sane joining the party. He is looking for a childhood friend who has become an adventurer and disappeared 10 years previously. Frieren and her group's goal is to reach the city of Oberst, a city populated by wizards, and where they will be able to take an examination to become first-class mages, which is the only way that they can proceed in their adventure. Because the north of this particular setting is in a significant amount of chaos. And so Frieren and Fern take the mage exam, or the first class mage exam, which is ultimately overseen by an old acquaintance of Fern's, an even older elf named Ciri, who is not terribly fond of Frieren. And so volumes 5, volume 5 is the first part of the exam, in which the examinees are split into teams of 3 and are set to hunt a strange bird called a stele, and keep it until the end of the examination. So the only way to pass is to either capture a stele or to steal it from a team that has already captured one. And so Fern's team manages to quickly capture one and defend it from a rival team. And Frieren takes a little bit more time for her team to capture one, but then they also successfully defend it from a rival team. And both Fern and Frieren's teams passed on to the second stage. The second stage is a dungeon raid in which all of the passees from the first stage participate. This dungeon has been unexplored, and the goal is to really form a team. And eventually that's figured out that everybody needs to participate, because the dungeon is controlled by a demon that can make magical copies of others. And so the only way to defeat these copies is to team up. And Frieren and Fern are accompanied by Sensi, the proctor for this exam, because in order to make sure the exam goes well, she's joining them to sort of be there at the end. And so a number of the testees kind of get together, figure out how to defeat the dungeon, and Frieren and Fern battle the most powerful of the copies, while the others hold off the other clones. And many of them successfully pass. However, this causes a bit of a problem for the third exam. And so Ciri herself decides to proctor the final exam, in a rather interesting way. And what I really like about that chapter is how is Frieren and Ceri's encounter uh, during it. It's really good. So I mean, I really enjoyed these volumes. They were quite a lot of fun. Um, and particularly how this volume was a bit more sort of episodic, while 5 and 6 were more arc heavy. It was quite nice. Um, and I also really like how on the cover you have, and then on the inside, only Frieren is kind of prominent. Everything else is sort of toned out. And the reason for that is that um, this is very much a story of a nearly immortal being um, living her life. And so Frieren has a very different sense of time. For her, it doesn't really matter if something happens today or a year from now or a decade or even several centuries. It's all the same to her. She will largely remain unchanged. Now, everybody else around her will die, particularly like humans, because humans live for like maybe the equivalent of 2 or 3 seconds, maybe a month, for a being who would live for millennia. And so that's really interesting. I really quite like that. Even though Frieren does act quite the child much of the time. So let's look at some pictures. And I also really like how a number of events in the current storyline will draw back Frieren's memory to when she was with Himmel and her earlier party. I mean, I love this cover. That is, chapter cover is really, really cool. And here's another really cool cover. Yeah. Let's do some from volume. Oh, yeah, really fun. Okay, so finally, let's talk about Yu Yu Hakusho. So I read the final volumes of Yu Yu Hakusho by Yoshihiro Togashi. So Yu Yu Hakusho is the story of a juvenile delinquent named Yusuke Urameshi, who sacrificed his life to save a young boy from being run over by a car. This event was not fated, and so the powers that be in the underworld granted Yusuke the opportunity to come back to life. He successfully does so, and in the process is appointed spirit detective. He is responsible for making sure that supernatural events do not impact the human world in a negative way. During Yusuke's time as spirit detective, he encounters two yokai, Kurama and Hiei, who become two of his companions in arms, his friends, as well. And another joining them is the mortal Kurabara, who was a school rival of Yusuke's, who himself has a level of supernatural ability. The quartet are make an enemy of a powerful demonic martial artist named Toguro, and he invites them to participate in a tournament composed of mostly demons. And Yusuke's team manages to make it to the finals and defeat Togoro's team, which this volume opens with. After the conclusion of the Dark Tournament, Yusuke is tasked with investigating a portal to the demon plane opening. And so he goes to a city where a number of people have begun to develop supernatural abilities. And Yusuke and his companions discovered that the source of this disturbance, this portal opening, is caused by his predecessor as a spirit detective, a man named Shinobu Sensui, who has gathered together one demon and 6 newly awakened superhumans to help him open a portal to the demon world. And so Yusuke and his friends engage a Sensui's group and eventually get to Sensui himself, which is a hard-fought battle, and awakens within Yusuke a hidden lineage. It is revealed that Yusuke's many great grandfather was a very powerful demon. And at the end of the series, Yusuke travels into the demon world to spend time with his ailing mini great grandfather, who is slowly starving himself to death. And with his death, the demon world will be thrown into chaos because Yusuke's many greats grandfather, Ryzen, is one of 3 demon kings. And they currently exist in a balance of power. But with Ryzen dying, the whole system will collapse. So the other 2 demon kings, Yomi and Mukuro, recruit Yusuke's yokai companions, Kurama and Hiei. Yomi was a former companion of Kurama's, and Mukuro just approaches Hiei. And so what Yusuke does to avert all-out war is to propose a massive tournament to determine who the king of the underworld is. And so this storyline takes up a few volumes of 18 and the beginning of 19, and then the final volume of 19 is to wrap things up, which was a bit disappointing. I mean, the demon tournament arc and the final storylines, I'm not entirely sure what happened. Because really, I think Yu Yu Hakusho could have gone on. So I've never quite understood if there was the magazine decided to end the series, or if Togashi decided to. I've never really looked into it. I probably should, because it is disappointing. I mean, the series could have gone on for quite a while, and still been really good. But nevertheless, I mean, the Dark Tournament arc is amazing. The chapter Black art arc was really good. It is my personal favorite arc in the entire series. So anyway, so let's look at some images. So this is Toguro in his most powerful form. And I also really liked how the Toguro and Sensui are characterized. How in Togoro's case, he is still dealing with guilt. Before Toguro became a demon, he was a martial artist who had his own dojo, whose students were killed by a demon. And over the course of 50 years, he searched out increasingly powerful opponents to test his might against, and he always won. And how much of Togoro's quest was to test himself, and how much was him ultimately wanting to be physically pummeled to death as a form of punishment for surviving when his students didn't. Yeah, this is hilarious. And there's something similar with Sensei, who has a very black and white sense of morality. He was born spiritually powerful, and this made him a target of demons for his whole life. So he saw demons as purely evil. And then he encountered the Black Book Club, in which humans opened a portal to the demon world and kidnapped a number of demons and did unspeakable things to those demons. That demons were not the perpetrators, they were the victims. And this just shattered Shinobu's sense of morality. And he decided that the only way for this to be righted is for a portal to be open to the demon world, allowing the most powerful demons to enter our world and exact a form of justice. Although even here, how much of Shinobu's actions were an attempt to punish himself, to see justice meted on himself for what he did to the demons he encountered, whether they were guilty or not. And I love that. Hiei falling out of the tree. So yeah, this was fun. I really had a blast reading these volumes. Okay. Oh, it's just really fun. Okay. That's all I read for this week. So over this coming week, I'm going to read probably 6 volumes of Bleach by Tite Kubo, starting with volume 7, Saturday, and then starting Sunday and going into the work week, I will read all of Demon Slayer by Koyoharu Gutage, which I'm really looking forward to. So, anyway, BookTube. Again, my manga videos been a little long. Sorry about that. But I had a lot of fun reading them. So, anyway, BookTube, I'm going to sign off for now, and I will see you next week. So, until then, thank you. Have a great rest of your evening and weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Unless I get a manga haul this weekend. If I do, then I will do a haul on Saturday. And if not, there will probably be a haul sometime early next week. So anyway, until then, thank you and stay safe.